Hey everybody, it's Tracy again, and wanted to talk about the regulation or lack thereof as it relates to yield farming, which is commonly referred to as staking. And the concept generally involves contributing crypto to a smart contract, which holds the crypto for purposes of providing liquidity to a DEX or some other decentralized application, and in turn you earn rewards, right? And those rewards are determined by the amount of crypto and how long it's been staked and so on and so forth. And the return is often given in the form of a native token or some other cryptocurrency. And to date, as with most of DeFi, there's been very little regulation, and obviously the attempts at regulation thus far, especially in the United States, have really come through enforcement actions, regulators like the SEC or CFTC suing promoters and companies that are running these platforms, and then the law sort of generates through their common law, right? And to date, the most activity has come in the context of the application of securities laws, and things, projects like SALT and others have found themselves in regulatory peril because a yield farming platform, in a great sense, looks exactly like an investment product, right? Because what you have is you are, albeit for some limited period of time, contributing property, and you're earning a return for that contribution. So it's very difficult to say that it may not be a security. You can go into the depths of what decentralization is and whether the DAO or whatever entities controlling it is truly decentralized, and if there isn't that common management, does that fall out of the Howey test? And I could talk for hours on that, and that's been undecided, but courts can look through that, and they have so far, right? So I think, at a first level, you have the securities law issue, and I think the tendency would be to say that yield farming platforms are in fact offering a security. And if you're offering a security in a private offering like this would be, then you're limited to accredited investors, right, who meet certain income or wealth requirements, or you would have to register the native token or whatever currency that you're returning back to effectively allow for retail, non-accredited investors to participate. So that's number one. Going beyond that, you have the issue of AML KYC, right? And whether, liquidity pools or yield staking platforms need to register as an MSB. And for the most part, they don't, right? It's hard to say that they do. You can look at whether the baseline question is really whether that platform is transmitting crypto or exchanging crypto. And by the broader definition provided by FinCEN of what a money transmitter is, then you could make the case that yes, you need to register, and the implication of registering as an MSB is that you're now subject to the Bank Secrecy Act, and if you're subject to the Bank Secrecy Act, then you have to do KYC and AML, and in the DeFi world, people, generally don't want to do that, right? And that's more of an optics and operational thing, but I think it's a real gray area as to whether or not you need to. I think, I don't know, the abundance of caution, maybe you do, but you also have to weigh that with your ability to actually operate and actually make it worth your while. So you have those two issues. And then the third issue that doesn't get a lot of play, but in a sense, right, especially when you're dealing with consumers, okay? Each state, and I did a blog post about this yesterday, each state has a consumer lending law, right? And they regulate, everything from interest rates to amounts and all sorts of stuff, right? And you can make the case, and Texas tried to make the case, or was trying to make the case against Celsius, that they needed to have a state lender's license because, in a sense, if you think about the concept of yield staking, it really is a loan, right? It's a loan with return. Now, granted, the consumer's making the loan, right? Not the institution. But does it require a lending license to do that? And to operate a platform, of which there have been many, most are defunct, just like based on fiat lending, like peer-to-peer fiat lending, all of those platforms eventually sort of went away because they didn't get lending licenses because they didn't think they needed them. And there's a good argument to say that they don't, because you're just like matching persons, right? But the same holds true here, right? Would you need to go through and get a lending license in every state in which you wish to like operate, which if you're not doing KYC, it's gonna be really difficult to even find out, right, where people are coming from. So, and of course, along with getting a lending license, if you went through that exercise, which different platforms like Nexo. Obviously, it's expensive and time consuming, but it also triggers your AML KYC. And then you have tax reporting and you have all these other things that come into play. So it's those three areas. And there's such scant sort of evidence or cases you can point to and say, well, it was here, or here it was a security, here it wasn't, here this. And you see a lot of bigger players just sort of moving away from it because of the uncertainty, or because they've come to the conclusion that it's a securities product. And the reality is, yes, you could go in, like the SEC has said, and register, but filing the registration and getting approval of it aren't one and the same, right? We've seen that with a lot of different token offerings, and you could get tied up for years trying to get registration, and it may not be financially viable nor worth your time because you could get denied in the end. So, I think it's a gray area, right? And most operate offshore, and then you also have this decentralization aspect in terms of corporate structure, which, plays into it. And I think eventually it'll bear itself out. But if I'm running it and I'm involved in it, those are the 3 points: securities, payments, MSB, and then state level lending laws as it relates to yield farming and the like. So that's my non-answer to a very important question, because quite frankly I don't know what the answer is, right? I don't think anybody does, else you wouldn't see a lot of this stuff. So anyway, if you have any questions, definitely hit me up, adamtracy.io, and I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.